Welcome to this installment of the Officer Quick Chat. I'm Paul Peluso, an editor with Officer Media Group, and I'm joined today by David Higginbotham, product marketing manager with Safariland Group. Thank you for joining us today, David.
Hey, good to be here.
Okay. Today we'll be discussing the Safari Vault holster. What makes the Safari Vault holster different from other duty-rated holsters from Safariland?
So I'm going to show you Safari Vault here first and foremost. This is a new design that launched in January of 23 at SHOT Show. As you can see, it is it's an injection molded holster, very similar to what we have had in the past with our 7TS line. Now, this is one that's been through all of our retention testing, which is why I have some notes here on the front of it. The 7TS line was an evolution that came out of the 6000 series line. So back when Bill Rogers first formed Rogers Holsters and started working with retention within the holster design, rethinking, getting out of leather and into different products, he started putting Kydex inside the leather. Now, these are made out of a material called Boltron, which is very similar to Kydex in its thermoform properties. It is thicker, more rigid, and offers us a stronger holster body. But effectively, it is a sheet of thermoform plastic that is wrapped around a mandrel and formed, and all of the security devices mount directly into that. When we make these, they're made one by one. It's a very handmade process. This for us was super, super effective, but it took a long time for us to fill orders, especially in large scale, because of the nature of the production that was behind it. We've been making these holsters for more than 40 years now. There's a long track record of success, and we're still making them because they're incredibly popular with a lot of officers, and especially people who are in that commercial space who have a history with Safariland holsters. This is the type that they go for very specifically. They're oftentimes Cordura wrapped, like this one has the tiger stripe camo pattern on it. When we moved into the injection molded holster design, we ended up with a holster body that was more compact and lighter. Our security devices are still exactly the same. The SLS strap, the secure locking strap, and the ALS lock that is thumb activated underneath, they both function exactly the same way. The 7TS line was one that was built almost completely flat. The way these holsters come off the line looks something like this. And here, of course, is the ALS lock on there. And then they're folded together and screwed in place, as well as clicking in place. While the 6000 series offers a lot of user adjustability, customization to the holster body itself, especially with the way in which the ALS and the light pocket, everything operates, the 7TS was a little bit more rigid in its styling. We can't do the Cordura wraps on them. They are the color that they are to begin with. We can't do a leather wrap over the top of them. We do have a uniform look, which appeals to our LE customers very much, but the user adjustability of it was not quite where we were with 6TS. That 7TS style is carrying forward into Vault. But what we're doing is we took a third holster family and we have built in a lot of the criticism that we have received off the 6TS line, a lot of the changes that were made and requested over the last 12, 13 years really of the 7TS line, because that's how long that one has been out. And we built them into one specific big overbuilt holster body that accommodates all of those very specific changes. So we started off with security in mind. We wanted to build the absolute strongest holster body Safariland has ever built. And so instead of doing the fold together design, we went back and we have molded this one in two pieces and they bolt together. If you look at the bolts here that are on the front, they bolt together there, and there's several places in the back where the screws engage directly into the plastic. It's an exceptionally strong body. A lot of the 7TS line, while they are light and while they are reasonably small, they also have a certain amount of flex. It's hard to communicate over a camera like this, but the holster body itself almost has a pliability to it. And some of the people who have carried these holsters over the years perceive that as a lack of strength. It's not necessarily the case. All of those 7TS holsters pass our very extensive retention testing in exactly the same way, or we don't let them out the door. But they wanted something that they could do force-on-force training with specifically. A lot of times when force-on-force training happens, you remove the firearm, everybody starts really going at it. If a 300-pound officer falls on this holster and lands perfectly right there, the holster body is going to support that. We've gotten these to be so strong that you can actually park a truck on top of it and still holster and unholster your firearm. There's absolutely no rigidity, no flex in this. The rigidity is tremendous. And yet it still provides the SLS as well as the ALS, and we can take that to a level 3 or level 4 option by combining different security devices like the Sentry Guard or the ALS lock on top of that. So the holster body began with that objective in mind. We wanted it to be even more robust, stronger than it ever has been for any of the previous designs. The retention standards are exactly the same, yet we push this material to great lengths. When we begin the testing on this, we do our standard pull testing, but we also test for extremes of heat and cold. We do Instron testing where we put this into a machine and we test it to its failure point. We have made sure that this will pass all of the practical limitations that any officer might face while on duty, because our ultimate goal is to keep the gun in this holster until that exact precise moment that it needs to come out. That's how we've always designed these security mechanisms. We want the gun to stay in through everything, through the movement, through the regular getting in and out of a vehicle, through fast roping, whatever circumstances you might have on the job, including a force-on-force assault where someone is actively trying to snatch that in a situation that does not necessarily require lethal force. The gun needs to stay in. And that's what we have designed, is a holster that will accommodate that and keep the firearm in at all times. So we went back to the drawing board and we took a lot of the criticisms from 6TS and 7TS and built them back into this. The first was we've had requests for open optics pockets. A lot of our previous designs happened incrementally. If you think about 7TS being available for the last 12 years, well, there were not a lot of red dots in use 12 years ago. So we've had to modify that holster family, and it's come on board rather sporadically. Somebody requests a fit, we make the fit with the RDS, but it hasn't carried across every fit through the entire line, because that would require us to go back and modify all of the tools specifically used to do the injection molding. So with Vault, we opened up the light pocket and the optics pocket. That optics pocket now will accommodate everything from a closed emitter, like an acro, on down to the smaller pieces like the RMR. These are open. I do not have a hood on this. This one does have a little hood that will retract over and cover everything completely. Because of the way I've been using it, I've taken that hood off. You can snap it on or off. It will. Any optic that will fit on here will fit within that open light pocket, and that'll be standard across all of the fits that we offer specifically for Safari Vault. And then we did the same thing on the light pocket size. You can see there's a slight corner right here on this fit. This is for the Glock fits and with a small light. So your 19 with a TLR7 or a 45, any of those fits here in this holster with that small light or any light that is similarly, I think right now we're up to 123 different light fits for this specific family of holsters. And that is not light specific for the design. Any of those lights that will fit in here will fit. And that's because down inside, and this will be almost impossible to see in this light, there is a spring that pushes up, almost like the leaf spring on an A model Ford, where that pushes back against the light. So when you holster the firearm, the spring catches and pushes the light farther back up to keep it stabilized. This eliminates some of the holster rattle that was apparent in some of the other designs. And so what you get is, like with this 45, which is unloaded, there's no magazine in it. This 45 will fit in and lock up with that TLR7 on there. And that stabilized light, there's very little rattle in this when you're moving around. Very stable, very secure, and no matter what light you put on the bottom of this, as long as it fits within the pocket, it will still pass that retention testing. Same thing for the optic. Light and optic, completely adaptable. Then you've got, in this one specific fit, you will get the 17, the 19, the 45. I believe the next one up, the larger Glock, will accommodate the 17, the 47, the 34. There's a wide variety of those 9mm double stack Glocks that will fit within these family of holsters, because part of what we have done is open up the bottom. Whereas a lot of the previous designs had a closed bottom that had a little index point inside where there would be a post that indexed into the muzzle, this one has been opened up completely. And we've opened it up in two places on this design. And what that does is it allows for us to have debris, brass, even some muzzle devices and threaded barrels clear the end of this without any obstruction within the holster body itself. And that was a huge component part of what people oftentimes have asked us to do. They love our holsters, but when they're on the range and they fall over or they move, they get dirt or debris, or even sometimes when they're actually firing, brass will land in their holster. We make our belt loops incredibly tight and rigid. So in order to physically get that piece of brass out of your holster, you had to kind of contort your body and do this Safariland dance to get the brass out that was a little bit uncomfortable for some folks. So now we have that clearance built into those holster designs, and it's almost completely clear all the way through. In this case, there's just this one bar, and it's actually beveled on the inside for that to pass through. So in addition to the spring that's pushing up on the bottom of the light, we have another aspect of this which protects against finger ingress. So when you actually holster the firearm, there is a component piece right here underneath that cradles that trigger guard. It rises up and embraces both sides of it. And this reduces the side-to-side torque of the firearm itself. This is hugely important for us because what we're trying to do is restrict the access to that trigger from the side. A lot of times when we have holster designs that are built for lights like the X300, any of the dual side-by-side battery lights, they have to have a very wide clearance. And what that's done for us is present a problem because people can get their finger inside the holster, even if the holster, the gun is remaining in that spot safely. So we're working to reduce finger ingress by tightening up those channels, eliminating that, providing the stability with the trigger guard support. Then on the top side, a lot of times when we're working with an RDS holster, when people are holstering something that has an optic up top, they end up catching and pushing the gun out of battery because they're catching the front of the red dot instead of getting the firearms straight into that channel. So what we've done inside is we have optimized this by designing the ALS to where as you reholster, it's going to grab that frame and begin to move it into position. And then we have a magnet that is in the holster body itself behind this little window right here. And that magnet picks up on the slide and secures it back into position as it goes down the channel and gets fully seated. So from everything from the inside to the outside, we've taken this approach of making it as user-friendly as we possibly can, while still maintaining the familiar usage that those who are already experienced with Safariland retention devices might currently have. So for example, your ALS and your SLS are going to function in the exact same fashion. Holstering and unholstering, it's the same style of motion that you would be familiar with if you've run a 7TS or a 6000 series holster over the years. All of that should be very, very familiar, reducing that learning curve. But there are other things here that you might not notice that are more subtle. If you look at the front of this holster, there's no longer the ALS spring built into the outside. Part of what we have had with the 6000 series, hugely successful, but the ALS spring is mounted on the outside. There is an outside chance that if you encounter a door frame in just exactly the right way, you might shear off this cover, you might wreck that spring. And we see those happen very infrequently, but when they do, it locks down the ALS, or sometimes the ALS won't lock down, depending on the malfunction. It can be relatively crippling for the holster itself. So we wanted to secure that and move it back inside. And so that's what we've done here. All of the controls for this holster are built into the body. So now no impact on the outside will compromise the ability to get the firearm out or keep the firearm in. It's all going to stay very, very secure within this design. By injection molding this in two pieces, we have greatly increased the strength of the side-to-side retention of the holsters. A lot of times what we have seen is as demands for very specific products, specific guns have come and evolved over the last 12 years. Some of our original designs needed some extra support. So this 7TS holster here has a rigid strength band over the outside that's a one-piece mold that adds that extra element of strength to prevent the firearm from being torqued this way and separating that back seam of the holster. We've built that in here with this design so it stays completely rigid. Now we're still using the same three-hole pattern for all of our mounting options. So this UBL here that's on the back could be a thigh rig, it could be a mid ride or a high ride or a low ride. It could even be one of our QLS forks that would allow that to be clipped in and out as necessary. All of the adaptability is there within this design for all of the different mounting platforms that Safariland does and has over the years, built off of that three-hole pattern. And then on the back, there's one last benefit, and that is that we have the Axon signal device cavity built into the holster body itself. So when you're running a light on the firearm and you have an Axon device going in and out, it's very, very easy because that cuts it on and off for you automatically. You don't have to put on a separate bracket onto the outside to hold that in. So from the open bottom to the redesign entry, the strengthened lever lock, everything about this, it's one step up. And what we want to emphasize severely here is that we have an entire sort of line of holsters that will appeal to different people in different ways. The 7TS is still very popular for people who are patrol officers. They love this because it's lighter, it's more compact. Many of them feel like it's easier to use this when getting in and out of a vehicle all day. And that was something that we heard over the 6TS, which even though it's not that much larger, it is slightly larger than our 7TS line. This holster feels super robust. A lot of our customers still prefer the feeling of the Boltron and the way the Cordura wrap eliminates that plastic feel to it. They gravitate towards that. Vault in its inception was not meant to replace 7TS. It was not meant to replace 6TS. It was meant to provide one more level of robustness to our family of holster designs and really evolve based off of what Safariland has heard feedback-wise over the years. All of the different inputs that we get, we want to build moving forward. But we wanted to build one holster family that would accommodate all of the evolving lights and optics rather than building off individual molds as a new optic or a new light came into play. So we've been working with the light and optic companies to make sure that what they're building and what we're building lines up to where we're really there at the time of launch. Anytime a department picks up a new light, they don't necessarily have to pick up a new holster. It'll fit within the same structure of where we are right there. And we've got fits for this coming right now for the Glock guns on the small light. And then we have the Glock 9mm off the large light component, which is built off the TLR1 X300 size lights. Then we have the SIG P320 coming shortly thereafter. We'll have these in right-handed and left-handed for all of those fits, for all of those lights. And then the fits after that are still something that we're discussing internally, but it will at least have the SIGs and the Glocks here within Q1, Q2 of 23.
Well, David, this is really good information about the Vault. And like you said, it isn't really meant to replace the other models, the 7TS and the 6TS. But how is the Vault shaping the future path of Safariland holsters?
Absolutely. We are really, really committed to this idea of accommodation within the lights and optics. I mentioned that a little bit before, but what we want to do is we want to build something that'll work across everything, because this has been a big problem for us, both commercially as well as with departments who make changes. If you change your firearm, if you want to move from the Glock platform right now, from a Gen 3 or Gen 4 that's not MOS into one of the Gen 5 MOS guns, you don't necessarily have to go out and buy an entire new holster platform. A lot of the firearm companies out there have really good incentive buybacks to swap out guns and to make that move. But what we find is that the investment it takes for a department to get back into holsters might be limiting their ability to move and adapt and expand at the pace they want. So the first and foremost, we're looking at adaptability within these designs. So even within the 6TS line, we have a lot of 6TS holsters that are built off very specific light models. But what we're doing right now is we're moving more towards a build quality that will allow us to, within that same holster, this one is for a TLR7, but it'll fit many of the small light patterns that are off the TLR7. So that multi-fit, even though this is for a Glock 19 with that small light, the way in which the light fits and indexes in there allows us a very good adaptable design that we roll forward. And then we've got some other designs coming out, some that have not been necessarily released yet. One of the ones that we were showcasing and teasing at SHOT Show is a holster that's called Solis. And this is for the Glock 43X 48. This design right here is built with an ALS lever on it. It's optic capable across the board, and it's built for the small lights, the TLR7 subs that go on the Glock 48s. And as you can see, there's a family resemblance in the way that this two-piece design bolts together. And so this grew out of a desire for us to have something that would be easily concealable outside the waistband. You look at Vault, Vault's going to be a challenge to conceal outside the waistband, even in a high ride pattern. But if you put that right next to Solis's footprint is significantly smaller. I'm trying to orient this here for you. And it'll allow people who have a need for a level 1 duty holster in optic light capability, off a belt loop, to have something there that they could even use for duty use or for concealed use while on duty as well. Every aspect of this operates exactly the same. It doesn't have the SLS hood, but the way it fits, the way it indexes, our trigger guard ingress, the open bottom, a lot of elements that we have built into Vault, we are now building into Solis, following up closely on its heels.
Well, David, I'd like to thank you for sharing all this information on the Vault and the other holsters as well. This was really a good behind the scenes look at what you guys do and the holsters that you offer and some of the benefits. So I'd like to thank you for joining us. And I'd like to thank Safariland for sponsoring this quick chat. And yeah, everybody make sure that you check out the Safari Vault and take care and look forward to having you guys on the next quick chat.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.